This podcast is brought to you by the Prospect Research Institute, where researchers come to learn, innovate, and connect.
We never truly were asked or we asked the question, how can we do good with data?
Welcome to Prospect Research Chat Bites, a podcast by and for prospect research professionals. I'm Jennifer Filla. Today, I'm talking with Meena Das, community data strategist and founder at NamasteData. Hello, Meena. Thank you for joining me today on Chat Bites.
Hi, Jen. So nice to be here. I have been really stalking this podcast for so many years. It feels like a fangirl moment here. So thank you for having me.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. Thank you, Meena. So, not only have you been stalking me and I didn't know it, but you and I have had a couple of conversations already. I am reading your newsletter, so kind of stalking you and your recent trip to India, for example. And it's the reason why I'm so eager to talk to you today and to interview you. I'd really like to see if we can explore your passion for data equity and do that through the various ways you interact in the professional space. So to get started, let's talk about what does data equity mean to you?
It's an interesting question. What does data equity mean to me? And I have explored this question through different lenses for the last 18 months since I have opened my own practice, and I do this through different roles for the nonprofits. And I would say I have come to a decent definition, but when I like to talk about it, I start with an example, a kind of a half-baked example that would lead to some sort of, hopefully, a better definition. Jen, have you been on a train?
Yes.
And every train has those coaches, it has like about 10 to 15 seats in every coach. And I like to imagine data, and you work with data. So, play with this imagination with me here. Your data, imagine, is that your data set is that coach. Okay. And every person in that coach could be from different walks of life, different nationalities, could be, somebody could be disabled, somebody could be, they are able-bodied, somebody could be coming from all different kind of backgrounds, identities. They're sitting in a train, they're sitting on the train, and every person on that coach, that's your data point in that data set. And when we want to do something with that data set, oftentimes what happens is we tend to lean towards the majority. Well, what's the majority saying? What does the majority look like? But the reality is, let's go back to this simple example. There's this data that's the coach. It has these little different data points with people with their own individual stories, with their own individual backgrounds. And if I ask you, which is a hypothetical question, I'm not asking you, I'm like, imagine with me if I ask you to look at each of those data points and find something about them to be using it in a way that includes them, that doesn't exclude them, that doesn't alienate them, how can we do that? And to be able to answer to that question, if I ask that question to myself, which I have in the past, I look at every person individually. We would have to spend time on that data point. We would have to know where that person is coming from. What's the history? What's the background? What's the context? What are the different components of their messy identities? Our identities are truly messy to put them in 8 clean boxes, for that matter, of social identity. And I would have to look at each person differently, separately, so I can come to that place where I can say, okay, now these are the 7 insights of this coach that ensures that they are included in anything that we want to do. Data equity in my mind looks to me that kind of an effort that we need to put to understand every data, not just to see it as it's a number 2 or it's the alphabet B or it's a term, or it's a zip code V6, B1, B5. It's not just a zip code. There's a whole story behind it of the people in on that zip code, the houses, the trees, the buses, the policies that were made, and how do we get to that part of humanizing and understanding what that story is? That to me is thought of the data equity. And this was the kind of the philosophical way I reached to a definition of what data equity is, which is basically when you are doing a research, are you considering the community who need to be centered in your objective? Are you centering that community in your collection, in everything that happens after the analysis? Are you centering your community when you are disseminating and sharing that knowledge back? How do we really include the people about whom we are doing this work? That for me is becoming the topic of data equity.
Wonderful. Very interesting and very visual. I appreciate that.
I'm glad.
So, with this definition of data equity, how are you focusing on that in your work as a consultant? And you sort of alluded to that.
As a consultant, I work with nonprofits in helping them with two ways. One is, kind of giving these, again, visual examples and showing them what data equity could truly mean. We never truly were asked, or we asked the question, how can we do good with data? Data is kind of the sugar that we consider. Everything should have like sprinkles of good data here and there. Our data gets collected every other day. Right now, it's being collected on my watch. It's being collected on some of the devices. But we never get to ask, or we're asked, how do we do good with data? So when it comes to consulting, my first priority is to work with nonprofits, every member of that organization as much as I can, to share, ask this question, can you do good with data? Because that allows them to become more intentional with that 72% of something and something on that report. And they start asking questions. Where is that number coming from? Why is it written in front of me? Why am I looking at this number right now? Instead of thinking straight going into what my next step should be or what my strategy should be. The number two way of working with data for data equity with the nonprofits through consulting is on their projects, directly on the project. So I do it in three ways. One way is in their data collection. So an example would be I would be assessing their data collection plans that they have had over the years. And an example would be I found this interesting thing. A theater organization has 7 points from where they collected data. And they were all established in the last 10 years at different points in time. One was handled by one department, the other one was handled by another. And when we started to dig deeper and look into it, we found that there were questions and pieces asked to the patrons and the members of the theater organization that were same or very similar and kind of duplicate in those data collection pieces. And you can imagine if you are receiving same or similar questions from the same organization several times in a year, how it would make you feel. It would make you feel you are not seen, you are not heard. And why am I really being asked these questions if they are not doing anything with it? Asking me 3 or 4 times, it instantly causes some sort of alienation. So that's a very concrete example of how I do it in data collection. The other example would be I look at a lot of dashboards, all these, we love doing data science. And we have these dashboards, we have metrics and KPIs, and my job would be to look at them and say, okay, is everybody using it? Do we really need these 100 KPIs? Even though we migrated our CRM, we kind of migrated our same data values to this new system again, and we are trying to engage with this new system exactly the same way as the last time. Is that efficient? Is that a good way to bring everybody who can be engaging with this system or not? So that's another way I would deal with this question. How can we do good with data? It's a simple but profound question. How can we do good with data? And it happens to be translated in different ways in consulting.
When you talk about data collection, are you specifically referring to survey data collection or all kinds of data collection?
All kinds of data collection. So surveys happen to be the most common one for, I would say, a couple of organizations that I've worked with, that it is a common one. But then the other ways are they would have a Excel spreadsheet set up, like in the programming side of things, where fundraiser would have the task, or a programming side person delivering the service would have the task of entering the data when they are providing the services to the members. Or there would be forms that are set up on the website directly, which are not really surveys, but they're again entering data. So data collection, when I talk about it, I kind of mean it every single point from where a number or a data point or anything can enter into the realm of the organization. That becomes like the data collection source.
And how are you using data equity when you're speaking and training? How does that translate there?
I'm trying to think the two lenses that I want to talk to when I respond to this question. So one is as the speaker, directly as the speaker, then myself, I would respond to that question. And the other one I would probably want to respond as the person who delivers those workshops. How do I approach that? So the first part is as the speaker on these topics, I have created workshops around advancing equity in data collection, and then advancing equity in visualization, and how can you center humans and algorithms and artificial intelligence? How can we do that? I have tried to pick topics that seems to be easy, but yet somehow inaccessible. I have tried to pick topics that are right between us in front of our eyes and yet gets ignored for some reason, and turn them into workshops and speaking engagements and any space that would really have a place for one more topic of the question, how do we do good with data? I would be there. The second angle how I want to respond to this question is how am I talking about data equity as a speaker or workshop trainer would be I have a two-part approach in delivering these workshops. One is I offer them to the entire nonprofit if they are at the same page, ready to collectively ask the question, how do we do good with data? The alternative approach to that I have is doing these workshops every 15 days for individuals. I have realized that data equity is a topic that requires some time for everybody to understand how do I want to engage with that word. Because for some, it's very important right now that yes, inclusion, justice, equity is very important. For others, it is okay, it's a good to have topic. Let's keep it and see it what happens in the conference. I want to create a space where that learning doesn't depend on any role of the organization to say everybody has to come or nobody can learn. It's not one or nothing kind of an approach. So I reiterate my whole entire workshop every 15 days. It's a lot of work for me, but I love doing that every 15 days. And even if there are like 3 people, I would do that and you would make a small cohort. The other way I ensure that topics of data equity, which one again is, you want to be inclusive of the people who are coming to your workshop, is I do these question-based equity discounts, which is kind of related to data, how you use your data. And if you go on the website, you will see these questions and they are sort of based on your life circumstances. And depending on that, you pick a place where you can be and you can join the workshop. So I would say I don't just try to talk about data equity, I try to live it in the way I offer my work and deliver my services. So that's probably a way I would say I approach it as a speaker or workshop training.
Along that same line, I'm curious, what is the outcome you really want people to have or outcomes? So if they hear you speak, if they come for a workshop, what happens when they are done the workshop? What do you want to have happen?
Imagine a table where there are 15 people sitting. 10 of them are white leaders of the organization. 3 or 4 are BIPOC members of different parts, maybe a few first generation immigrants or not. And they are discussing a report on something filled with numbers, filled with charts, added with a few stories here and there. My workshop alone is not going to change and bring all the outcomes that I hope to see in this world. But at the same time, if they have taken a workshop like mine, talking about data equity, I want everybody on that table to look at those numbers and charts and ask questions. So what? Where is it coming from? Why am I looking at it? I don't want them to feel rushed that, yes, now I have seen this beautiful chart and then that's that. Now, next step, what do we have? When do we get the next report? What do we do next? The sense of urgency that we have created around data, that when do I get the next report, next profile, next metric, and what do I do now? Okay, I want that table full of people to be comfortably asking each other and maybe nicely debating a little bit about where's that data coming from? Do we really need to look at this for centering the people we are delivering our services for or have created our mission for? Is it truly about them, or are we chasing something and our attention is diverting to something which doesn't truly requires our attention and energy? In already we're living in a world which is kind of taxing our energy. I want that table to have that kind of a discussion comfortably. And again, like I said, I'm acknowledging my training alone wouldn't do get us to that part of that entire equity and ecosystem of justice, but it might be a start. That's the kind of outcome I'm hoping people would have after every workshop.
So interesting, because I've heard the same kind of concept where, if the leaders are not asking questions when you deliver your data, then you don't have a data-centered approach or a data decision-making culture. And it's that critical thinking. Data is meant to inform, not decide. And I guess when it's used to decide, then bias can easily creep in and exclude people.
Absolutely. I often, like I said before, and I often say, data is kind of considered the sugar, but it's really the salt. It's supposed to enable, it's supposed to help. It's not the end game, it's not the final thing. It's really just a piece that enables us to be doing what we are supposed to be doing, to be what we are capable of being, which is much bigger than the data itself.
Nice. Well, how are you interacting with data equity as a volunteer? What is that all about?
Very interesting question. So, as a volunteer, it kind of looks like everything that I do in consulting and in my workshop as a trainer. I do that as a volunteer for nonprofits. So, for example, there's an organization that supports new immigrants and newcomers in the country. It's based out of California. And the purpose of their work is connecting the first-gen immigrants with mentors in the Bay Area, and I think in the whole of US as well. And they wanted to do some data collection around their impact. They wanted to see how that impact is. And it's not just about those specific business or management or other topics of mentorship that happen. It's a lot more than that, because there's a whole emotional self that comes into these topics when you're talking about thriving in a business and building something in a new country and dealing with different cultures. And how do we take all that and turn it into a little bit structured data collection tool and bring that back? So I loved to be working on that project. I gave my time and learned a ton of things from them. And it was a very healthy two-way street kind of a collaboration. And we talked about how do we do good with the data that we might collect. They are a sort of a newish organization. So it was also interesting for them to be learning this idea. They wanted to start with the right step, and they wanted to start with this right learning. So that was pretty amazing too.
Wonderful. I'm curious, now that we've looked at these different ways that you interact in your life with data equity, how did it all get started? What put you down this path?
I love this question because I am asked that. I have about 15 years of experience, and I would say 10 of those have been with the tech. I have been a tech person a really long time. I have worked with data for a really long time. When I moved to States about 6 or 7 years ago, I was still in the tech. I completed my master's in Florida, moved to Seattle. I was still in the tech. And it was my first job. This is kind of the moment I'm trying to describe here is kind of the pivotal moment that got me into doing this business. I moved to Seattle about 5 years ago. And in my first job there, I met an accident and lost my teeth, the front ones. Now, obviously, the listeners here can't see the teeth, which is a good thing. But I lost my teeth, and I had to do a lot of work on it to get it to a place where I can speak again. And during the period of healing and taking care of all of it, I tried to find ways how to manage my financial bills, because it became a legal battle. The place where I felt was part of the office, but it was not entirely my work company. It was a little bit cafeteria, so who will pay and all that kind of thing. So I started to reach out to lawyers. I started to reach out to the labor's department to find any help that I can. And labor's department sent me a couple of letters, gave me a case number. Lawyers told me, oh, you are this our STEM F1 EAD, like the visa status that you are, alien immigrant, and this is your status. And even though I was part of like two very big, bulky databases of, one of probably the strongest nation in the world, I still felt powerless. I still felt vulnerable because I had no idea what to do, even though I'm part of those spaces. I have two numbers. I am represented in the labors department, but I have to just be on the phone calls. They would still say we can't do anything. It's because so and so and so legal things, and I wouldn't understand a single word. What do these things mean? The lawyers would say you are on a very limited visa here. You have only these two things we can do, but the corporations you work for are really big ones. We can't do much there. And nothing came out of it. And I would say that made me really question for the first time, what am I doing with everything that I do with data for the last 15 years? I'm living in those two data points right in front of me in those letters. And still I am so powerless. And I am just one example of many, many in this world, or maybe data points of here and there on the reports, on the news channels, on different places. But I'm sure they don't have a single bit of a power to do anything to support their life in a way they wish it to be. And that made me question everything that I do and wanted me to explore what it means for the nonprofit specifically to think, how do we do good with data? And when I started, I had absolutely no idea how this would turn out to be. Should I be doing it? What would people say? What kind of narratives do I need to build here? How do I even talk about the services? Because nobody thinks about this question, how do we good with data? That's the least of our problems in the nonprofit industry. How do we even talk about this? But I still wanted to take up that battle and I still wanted to do that. And here I am 18 months later, happily doing it.
That's fabulous. And you have a beautiful smile for people who can't see.
Thank you.
I keep in my head seeing the flip side of the number. We do see percentages all the time, but which percentage we're presented with makes all of the difference. And when I look at numbers, I'm always thinking, well, who's the other percent? And we're often presented with the largest percentage number, but not the smallest. And that smallest might be made up of multiple percentages. So, yeah, it's as a nonprofit organization with a mission to do good, we should be concerned about our data. And as a culture, we are not concerned about our data. That's beginning to change. I'm hopeful for shifts. People like you are important to make that happen. Before I let you go, if people want to learn more about your work doing good with data and they want to connect with you, how can they do that?
They can reach me through the website. My website's name is NamasteData.org. For anybody listening, I would spell it out. It is NamasteData.org, NamasteData.org. You can also reach me via LinkedIn. I try to keep it as up to date as I can. It's sort of the window to my digital home, so you can find me there. I'm also available on Instagram, though I'm not as active there. It takes a minute for me to find a dance post that I can really post for that platform, but LinkedIn and website are the best ways you can reach me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was Meena Das, Community Data Strategist and founder at NamasteData. If you got nothing else out of this discussion today, I hope you go back to your data and ask yourself, how can I do good with data? And if you want more, visit Meena's website and sign up for a workshop, download a resource, or join her e-news list. You are in for a treat at www.namastedata.org. Hey, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come check out the Prospect Research Institute's learning community. It's a membership community with powerful resources, great discussions, and comprehensive courses. Check it out at member.prospectresearchinstitute.org. I'd love to have you join me as a member of the learning community. See you there.